Hello, I am Grandmaster Mihail Marin, and I invite you to make together the review of the eighth round in the Candidates tournament. It was, as before, an interesting round, maybe less mistakes than earlier. So let's take the games one by one. We have Rapport against Duda. Duda seems to have been encouraged by the fact that Rapport had lost against the Russian defense one round earlier, and he repeats Nepomniachtchi's opening. But this time, Rapport shows that he has learned something from the previous round. On that occasion, if you remember, he played an experimental line, he had analyzed something, but okay, with these guys, this is not so simple. They analyze everything. So eventually, Nepo showed the way to equality, and then when Rapport became overambitious, he even lost. So this time, he plays more of a Rapport kind of opening, without theory, just developing and putting the focus on the middle game. Eventually it worked, but it's not that much about the merits of the opening. This is widely known as the Gleck system. It's like some sort of reversed Pirtz, or how do you want to call it, not very ambitious. And now Duda played a5. Personally, I knew this move sequence, but of course a5 can be similar, and well, the pawn gains some space on the queen side. Actually, engines slightly prefer this over a6. Anyway, the idea is to avoid knight a4 followed by the exchange of the bishop. So castles, and now h6. Actually, I'm not so sure that bishop g5 is such a threat, because if so, then h6. Now taking here doesn't promise white that much. He has this central expansion, but now, if so, the knight f6, and black is doing absolutely fine. And if bishop h4, of course g5 is risky. White will just sacrifice there. But okay, there is bishop g4, and there are actually some games like this. Now takes. Of course, now g5 was becoming a threat, so this intermediate move is necessary. White has knight d5. And well, if the queen had to retreat, then bishop takes f3, and we could say that white had achieved something. I mean, queen here, bishop f3, then the bishop goes back, then king h1, f4. Okay, it's not that much, but it's something. Unfortunately, black has queen g5. Now with the bishop not captured yet, white has to exchange, and this has two consequences. One of them is that the bishop has to go here, and secondly that white cannot think very seriously about f4. So actually there was a correspondence game like this. Of course, black's position is slightly more pleasant, but the game ended in a draw. Anyway, h6, and now Rapport started improvising. There are two normal variations. One of them is knight d5, and now okay, two possibilities. For instance, black can castle first, then take knight here, this, and knight f5. Just a normal position for black, but he can also take at once and go knight d4. Takes, and if white gets ambitious now, actually he can only be slightly worse because of the structure. g5, then king g7, maybe a4 if allowed. Maybe he can start with a4 actually. The other one goes like this: bishop e6, knight d2. Okay, just preparing f4, but it's kind of time consuming. We see that black has displayed the pawns in a very beautiful way. That was actually a blitz over the internet, Lisi with black. a3. Now if b3, then black can consider taking, and h5, for instance. And now white has to worry about knight g4. I mean, that's some sort of permanent issue. Black can play queen e7 and maybe go with the king to the queen side. And black has a very nice position. After f5, things were not by much better for white. Black had a very solid position, better structure. He eventually lost, but that's just a blitz. In principle, he's slightly better here. Anyway, being a player who has used Larsen Nimzovich defense a lot, 1 b3, Rapport played b3, probably wishing to restrict this pawn. But of course, this is some sort of waste of time. And now h3. Actually, now I don't know exactly what he had in mind after such a continuation where black is doing very, very well. Knight d4, okay, it is also correct. a3, another mysterious move. Well, if a4 was a threat, then of course a3 would be meant to meet a4 with b4. Probably he thought that in the near future he would play knight e2 or something like that, and then he wanted to be prepared for it. Takes. And now nothing really bad has happened for white. The normal continuation would have been this, and if so, then queen d2. It's like some sort of king's Indian. The position is equal, but okay, white has his flexibility. I mean, okay, it's like reversed king's Indian, more like a reti. It's a good position for both sides. But Rapport played f takes e3, and this is actually quite a comical move. There is no quick knight access to f5. F takes e3 is a possibility indeed, but usually when a knight could invade a5. But now there are not such prospects. b5, g4, he started his attack. Rook a7 is quite a good move. It just prefers defending the king side. Queen g3, and now h5. h5 is not such a bad move, but well, there is a rule saying that you should not move the pawns on the wing where the opponent is trying to attack. So probably rook e6 would have been more consistent. If now g7, then this is simply lost for white. Suddenly there are problems on h3. Knight g5 is the main threat. And if he prepares h4 like this, then just knight h7, and again it's only white's king which can be in danger, because rook g6 is likely to come, and maybe eventually h5 later. But h5 is not such a bad move actually. Black still has a good position. Okay, bishop h3, and now finally Rapport starts playing rook g1, an intermediate move, and this move somehow completely confused Duda. He could have just taken here. If queen here and knight f6, of course, strategically black is doing very well. Knight h5 would be the next move, of king g7, rook h8, and if h5, then king g7 anyway. If so, then king here knight h5, and well, okay, black is slightly better. There is no attack, and he has the better structure. Actually, he is more or less a pawn up, because he can take this pawn whenever he wants. What happened in the game was knight g5, which actually helps white. And now rook g2. Suddenly there is such a plan. Rook here and king g1. You remember a few rounds earlier, there was the game Nepomniachtchi against Duda. And in that game, Duda played h takes g5. He met g5 with h takes g5, opening the h file, which immediately put him in a lost position. So he did the same thing here. He helped white to open the g file. He must have a lack of sense of danger, or I don't know. And actually, things are not so bad for black yet. He could play the paradoxical move f6, because if g6, then the king is ready to run. And it's not so clear how white is going to kill him. There is no quick access to g7. By playing rook here, he immediately blocked the king's runaway. And now, okay, g6 was probably, he could still try f6, but it doesn't look so well. He played g6, after which is more or less losing. Now there is no defense against the attack on the h file. He went here, okay, this doesn't really matter. takes here, and now okay, queen h5, rook g7, knight here was also possible. He preferred to go knight here, and black resigned, because if so, then this and g6 for instance, and it's over. So not a big theoretical duel, but just one of those experiments by Rapport, original play, which actually didn't go too well for him. Didn't show that he improved his shape, but eventually Duda was also a bit far from his best days. Now we move to the least interesting game, Nepomniachtchi Ding. Everything okay. We see the same position as the previous game, but not g3. The feeling is that Nepomniachtchi sat at the board with a clear intention of making a draw. Queen f3. Now, actually, the usual move order is goes this way, but okay, Queen f3 transposes, Bishop g5. Personally, here I like the move Bishop e7. I want to keep the play on. If so, I had a game. Of course, not everything is forced here, but somehow black maintains active possibilities. Eventually, the game went very much my way. Now queen here, and now I took on h3, and it's winning, because if so, then for instance Bishop d6 or Rook f3, it's simply winning. But okay, of course White can improve, but the play is more consistent. Ding didn't have anything against a draw here, and now he played h6. And of course White takes on f6. If Bishop here, then okay, first there is Rook b4, and then Bishop takes f6 is more or less forced anyway. G5 is also interesting actually, and now Bishop here. The position remains about equal. The black king side is not so weak, because actually this knight is very stable. It cannot be attacked by any bishop. And okay, also these pawns are quite solid. So black retrieves the pawn, but no, Nepo didn't want to have such complications. He just took here, f5. Now if f4, then the king comes to f6, bishop e6, a5. Actually, black can even start to play. I mean, the position may be still equal, but I would slightly prefer black psychologically, because he has pawn mobility. But Nepomniachtchi made sure that he more or less forces a draw, and of course there was not. They were playing just to reach move 40. Now we will see that actually Nepomniachtchi day off, let's call it like this, was very inspired, because the runner-up Caruana, who was trailing by half a point, lost. Once again we see e4, e5, and Caruana went for the open Spanish, an opening I have written about for modern chess. I made the repertoire, and now c3, the good old main move. For decades this has been the main variation, but it seems that over the past years computer became strong enough to understand that there is no advantage for white in several forced variations. So c3, bishop c5, knight bd2. Okay, all these are the main moves. And now knight takes f2, the Dilworth variation. This is what I have examined in my repertoire. I have been playing bishop f5 much under Korchnoy's influence. In the match in Merano, which actually ended quite badly for Korchnoy, he still managed to win one of the games against Karpov with this system, which was new at that time. Knight c1, a3, b3, f6. F6 was a new move in that game, I believe. And eventually black got a very active position. Okay, it's still unclear, but okay, black is doing fine. knight d2 is the alternative, and then I came up in 89 with the new move f6, which seems to be the strongest. Engines think it's the best. Of course, at that time I just analyzed it, not asked the engines. There were no engines around. At least I didn't have one in 89. But there is a slight problem with this interesting variation. Knight takes d4. Now this is impossible because of f4 and then f5. And if queen d7, then f4 is molesting. And now you have to take here and play something like f6. But it's not so easy to do something against that center. I mean, the knight on e4 stands beautifully, but you can never be sure what will be in the center and also along the c file. Because, okay, c5 is not so easy to organize. So for these reasons, knight f2 is rightly the main line nowadays. And now bishop takes f2. I must confess that the modern move order surprises me a bit. In my times, black would usually play f6. If he takes f6, then maintaining the tension is not good because queen f1 and suddenly white gets a better regrouping. So only now takes here and queen f6, which transposes. The same if knight f1 as in the game, this just transposes to the game variation. Anyway, this is not wrong. White cannot take advantage of this slightly changed move order. Now the traditional main line goes like this, 95, and black has very good play. I mean, he has a rook and 2 pawns for 2 minor pieces, and he's well developed. Somehow his pieces flow very well. It's not an easy position to play. I mean, always when there is a rook against a knight and a bishop, both sides have to be careful. But Nakamura played knight f1 at once, so he was not surprised by the opening. I have examined this position in my repertoire, and I have signaled that bishop e3, which had not been tried before at the time I wrote the article. That is just a developing move which doesn't force matters. It deserves considering, and it's actually not a bad move. I remember I have recommended h6. But now, looking at the few games played, I would think that rook a d8 is the most logical move. I mean, just complete the development. And this is what Caruana faced against Jordan van Forest. The game went queen here, bishop f5. Now if bishop b3, we are back in our main game. So the game went like this, rook d1, h6, and somehow black was doing fine. I mean, after exchanging the bishop, white doesn't have the bishop's pair anymore, so it's not very easy to think of an active plan. Here there is knight g5, but then bishop f5, and actually the knight is slightly hanging now. If queen g4, then rook f6 makes sense. If b4, then queen g6, somehow this can be dangerous for white because, okay, his knight is hanging a bit. Actually, there is an interesting variation here, knight e6, then we pin. There is queen a2, and now rook here. The point is that if so, then rook e1 wins the queen. Rook f1, the queen goes there, and this position, okay, remains very complicated. The material remains equal. But the white is hanging a bit. Actually, there is a threat of mate in 1. So rook a8, I would consider to be the main variation. I'm not so sure what Caruana had in mind with his move order now and a bit later. He played bishop f5 at once. After bishop b3, the game re-entered the position I was talking about. But in principle, now that the rook is not on d8, so there is no danger of d4 yet. It's not so simple to find the best move with black.
If so, then knight g5 and queen g4. White has some pressure. If rook f8, then b4, and as said, d4 is possible, but it's not so clear. Not sure that it equalizes completely. So this remains a bit of a mystery. Anyway, after bishop b3, we can just think that we return to the position with rook a d8 and then bishop f5. Okay, so the next few moves are somehow normal. And actually now we should talk a bit about the position. Black has 2 pawns. I mean, for the rook and 2 pawns for 2 minor pieces, and his pawns are very compact. I mean, if they start just advancing, this can be dangerous. But well, the minor pieces are somehow controlling a lot of squares, and there are some small weaknesses on dark squares for black. So this bishop could be quite dangerous. And Caruana played a puzzling move now. He played c5. He played it relatively quickly. It's probably part of his preparation, or maybe a blunder. I'm not sure yet. Probably it's part of his preparation. But basically, I will explain why it could be some, not blunder, but maybe fake blunder. But if we think of it, I would not be keen to define my intentions with respect of the pawns so quickly. We'll see that now black gets in some danger to expose his dark squares. First of all, this move is interesting. Now if bishop g5, rook here, and the combination that could have worked in the game, then rook e2 is simply good for black. Because, as we'll see, because this pawn is defended. We'll compare later. If knight here, then bishop g6, and black is a bit more flexible here. He can choose several plans. If the queen moves away, then knight c5 is a possibility, and the knight can land on a very promising square. Of course, c5 remains an issue, but okay, it depends on what white is doing. Somehow black is more solid here. Rook e8 is also possible, and again c6 or knight c5 or c5. So c5 was very committal. Now the first question is what about bishop g5? Actually, Nakamura played knight g3 after less than 1 minute. So probably he didn't see the trick. Or they both analyze this position in detail, and they have very strong computers. The point now is that after rook here, this combination works. It just wins, because now, if so, suddenly bishop d5 wins the knight on b7, and it's over for black. This is why the pawn would have been useful on c6. But okay, there is this intermediate move. Now the bishop cannot retreat because simply rook e8. So he has to take here. And this is quite a funny variation. Now the threat is bishop b1. If b4, then it seems that black has a very strong initiative. He wants to open the a file for the rook. If knight here takes, rook here, somehow everything is hallucinating. If knight here, then b3, somehow black has very strong compensation for the piece. Rook a1 is more consistent. Okay, bishop b1. And now, okay, things would be fantastic for black if white wouldn't have this move. The point is that this prevents knight c5 on account of bishop e7. And probably black has some dynamic resources like this, threatening to take on f3, for instance, if queen takes here, and well, it's not easy now to attack the bishop on b1, because white has to care about his king as well. If king h1, then knight a5, and suddenly white is in trouble. But okay, play can continue in a very interesting way. Bishop here, knight d2, and knight c4.
And probably black has just good compensation for the piece. If takes here and knight takes here, then queen e2 threatens mate. Knight e2, or probably better than knight h3. Knight h3, queen takes b2. If so, then check, queen here, okay, it threatens, if h3, then rook f1 wins anyway. And if so, queen b2, with some sort of dynamic equality. In principle, I believe that black's play is a bit more comfortable, but in principle, white should not be in danger. True, queen d4 is a bit better, but now after, let's say, a5, dreaming of over defending this pawn, it's not easy to attack this bishop, so white doesn't really have chances to fight for an advantage. And in the long run, who knows what black may invent. Anyway, Nakamura played knight g3, which is a sound move, queen here. And now again a pawn move c4, which doesn't spoil the position, but it's not the move I would think to play, because now if e4, then there will be always this square for the white's minor pieces. Probably e4 is a better move order. If knight h4, let's say queen e5, bishop here, rook e8, and okay, he may play c4 later, but okay, he's not forced to define himself. Somehow the knights do not stand so well there. Or if here, then let's say queen here, preparing knight d6, for instance, because if knight takes here, then just c4, winning material. So c4 was played after 21 minutes of thought. Probably he had finished. Okay, also bishop d3. Bishop d3 and c4 consumed 3/4 of an hour to Fabiano. So I'm not sure whether this had been the end of his analysis, but in principle, I believe that white's play is a bit easier now. It does not have anything to fear. If rook here, for instance, then b4, h6, but okay, white may consider a4. No clear plan yet, but okay, he's very compact, and black has to just wait, and the knight cannot move away because of bishop c5. If a5, then this just weakens the structure, and then the queen could go somewhere to to a7 or b6. So Fabiano went rook d7. Somehow he's well regrouped. He's not in immediate danger, but it's also not easy to invent something. And I believe that now Nakamura played the move which marked the turning point in the game, knight h1. Of course, it's an exotic move, but I know that Nakamura is not very fond of studying classics, but I will show afterwards two short fragments where such moves were played. There are two ideas behind this move. First of all, to over-defend the bishop in view of this threat, and the second one is also to open new horizons for the pieces. Now e5 is really hanging because of the fact bishop g3. So finally, white has reached his dream position. It's maybe not better yet, but at least he has this stability. Now it's a one-way story in principle. Probably black should just go knight c5 and then knight e6, finally exchanging his passive knight. But Caruana went queen g6, and actually this was already a serious mistake in a slightly unpleasant position, because now h4, and it will turn out that white just won two tempi, and two important tempi. Bishop g4, there is no knight e6 now, h6, And okay, little by little, they entered an ending which was okay, very laborious, but with this stability, of course, only white can play for the win. And actually, he has a consistent advantage. Later, Nakamura spoiled it a bit, but in principle, it was a one-way story. So, quite quite a mysterious opening play or early middle game play by Caruana. First of all, I'm puzzled by his bishop f5 instead of rook a8. Secondly, I'm not so convinced about this c5 and then later c4. Even if this is okay for black, and it may be, I don't like the idea. I mean, it's the concept. You don't want to commit your pawn so soon because they are likely to get blocked. And of course, c4 is already close to being a mistake. I mean, now black is on the edge. He has to maintain the equalities somehow. Let me show you now the two short fragments. One of them is Nimzovich-Rubinstein in Dresden 26. Nimzovich played knight h1 in order to activate the knight the way it shows. And this is Lasker-Steinitz, their first World Championship match. Well, in principle, the best thing here for black would be to defend f7 with rook f8 and should have a big advantage. But knight h8 was also good. Steinitz wanted to defend f7 with the minimum of means and then fight on the rest of the board with all his pieces. Eventually he lost, but knight h8 is not a bad move. So we can see that Nakamura's knight h1 combines the ideas of these two games. One of them was defending f2, and the other one was to open new horizons for his pieces. We now switch to Firouzja Radjabov, e4, e5 again. Why would we be surprised? So it's the gioco pianissimo, the quietest of the plays, which is one of the main variations nowadays, and it's not always that quiet. And now before, we should understand that if castle, then g5 can be already dangerous. So this h6 is played before castling. In many games it's played like this, precisely to go g5. And the best thing white can do is to start the queenside attack, so that black loses stability in the center. If he insists with g5, then b5 and d4, things like that. Personally, I would just switch to the normal regrouping, because now white has wasted some time with his pawns, and black got in time to regroup properly. If white wants to do the same, then black can already become ambitious. If white plays d4, then it means that black is somehow better developed. Radjabov played bishop b6. Well, of course, this is typical structure, but you have to be sure what we are doing, because still this is a structural defect. Of course, now there is some pressure on the f file. There is this square, but you know, strategically, I mean, the future may be white, and actually in the game this is what happened only after some minor accuracy from Radjabov's side. So rook a2, okay, we saw this rook a7 played by Duda. The idea is the same, to indirectly protect the king side. Now bishop takes f4 doesn't seem so promising. Of course, if so, then d4, and without a light squared bishop, it's not so easy to believe that white really has an attack. And this bishop remains a bit passive here. But okay, rook f4 is interesting. Now, for the time being, g3 is not possible because of queen takes g3. Let's say b4, king here, g3,
White has regrouped a bit, but in principle, how does he untie himself? I think this is simply some sort of static equality. Firouzja played King h2, actually in a very similar position, but without these bishops and without this queenside diversion. This was played with the same opening, the Italian, by Karpov against Yusupov. And then he even went here and eventually g3, and he retained a slightly better structure. He repelled the attack and eventually won a good positional game. Queen f7. Okay, Efimenko against Reger played Queen h5. The idea is to prevent Knight g1 because, okay, without queens, somehow black has more space for his pieces. He doesn't have problems of coordination. g3 is not possible yet. And after Knight g3, he just played Queen f7. Almost like a loss of time. Bishop e3. Well, probably white is very slightly better, but the game ended in a draw. Personally, I'm not so crazy about wasting time this way. Well, actually the idea is that now white doesn't have g3, so maybe the idea of the lost tempo is not so clear. It's not clear who lost the tempo. Anyway, the game went this way, knight takes e3. And now is the moment when Radjabov somehow lost the feel of the game. He went king h8, which doesn't really contribute to anything. I would have preferred rook a8, just completing the development and making d5 a permanent possibility. If knight g1, for instance, to go g3, because okay, if g3 then knight takes h3. Then there is no more pressure on e5, and d5 is suddenly very active for black. If knight g4, then here and d5, and again, actually this was the threat. d5, b5, d takes e4, so it doesn't really work. Or finally, if b5, knight here, okay, black can regroup, the knight may go to b6. Well, now there is some play, but at least the knight is not hanging anymore. So probably this would have been more consistent. King h8 somehow allowed white to carry out his regrouping. Knight here, and well, little by little the position is more present for white because he simply has the better structure. Okay, we can stop here the opening, the examining of the opening phase. Just to highlight a few moments in the game. For instance, here Firouzja played rook e3, which takes away this square from the knight. And then Radjabov could have played this or knight f4 here and h5. Retrieving the piece with a very good position. The knight on f4 is simply beautiful. And then, okay, he got under some constant pressure. Here, actually, they were playing this position for 20 moves or something. And now, of course, it's not easy for white to make progress, but still he has this majority, g4, whatever. And now they were both low on time. Now Firouzja played king h3 with the obvious intention of playing g4. And okay, with about 1 minute on the clock, or maybe it was a bit more, 2 minutes, okay. With little time on the clock, Radjabov, I'm sure he saw this. They both must have seen it. But they probably thought it doesn't work. Well, what can white do? If queen d3, queen f3, this is not serious. Maybe they thought that knight g4 was the trick. Now the knight is hanging, and the knight cannot move away because of knight f6 with a double attack. But actually, the knight can move only in one way. It also attacks the queen, because if check, then king g6. And black has simply won a pawn. Everybody is hanging, so the pieces will be even, but black is a pawn up. If queen d3, then queen f5. And if so, then h5. Maybe this they didn't. Something they must have missed. Actually, the only chance for white is to play g4, check, and knight f7. Engines think that white has normal compensation for the pawn. I don't see it so clearly. Okay, queen b5 is kind of risky. But in principle, I would already prefer black here. Suddenly his structure is better. And then the final sequence is very inspiring. Actually, Judith Polgar was suggesting the move played by Radjabov. Of course, the position is just equal here. White doesn't have. Firouzja tried to play on, but this is just equal. And now Radjabov suddenly played king f6, which Judith was begging for. The idea is to go with the king to h4 and then just deliver mate somehow. E takes d5 is a concession. This check is not dangerous, and suddenly black has improved his structure a bit. The queen has to return. Probably the position is still equal, but okay, it's already pleasant to play with black. Firouzja now find the only move, rook e1, because okay, f3 was hanging and something has to be done about the king's entrance. Also, he has to defend this pawn. And okay, the position still remains equal, and the game just ended in a move repetition. Of course, they're both short of time. A few times they went down to 1 or 2 seconds. So, what can I say about this round? Well, the black Caissa, the goddess of chess, seems to stay on Nepomniachtchi's side. He made a colorless draw with Ding and increased his advantage over the runners-up. There were a few interesting openings, all of them with the exception of Nepos games, of course. But in principle, again, not games which you would call, crystal clear. I mean, this was a fight, and with mutual mistakes. Maybe this is what we have to expect nowadays from top-level chess.